Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive.
Always. What are we exploring today?
Today, it's all about relationships. But not just any relationships. We're going deep on marriage and family in the modern world.
Ooh, sounds intense. Where are we getting all this wisdom from?
Our main source is this book by Pasquale M Palmieri called Please Read Me .pdf. It's basically a guide for anyone thinking about commitment, already in a relationship, or maybe even looking back on past experiences.
Please read me.pdf. Huh, that's a pretty bold title.
It definitely caught my attention, and from what I've read so far, Palmieri doesn't hold back. He seems to have a pretty unique perspective, too, coming from a background in fiction, theater, and even personal development.
Interesting mix. So where does he start? Does he jump right into modern-day relationship drama?
Actually, he takes us all the way back to explore the history of marriage. You know, it's amazing how much we take for granted about something that's been around for so long.
It is fascinating how much the language itself reveals about societal norms.
Oh, like what?
For example, the word marriage originates from Latin terms for husband and male.
Wow, I never thought about that.
It really makes you wonder how much that inherent bias still influences us today.
Yeah, it really makes you think.
Definitely. And on that note, Palmieri dives into the various ways people have lived together throughout history.
I'm guessing he's talking about, like, monogamy, polygamy, all that.
Exactly. Monogamy, where you have one partner, seems to be the norm now, but there's also polygamy, multiple partners, and even polyandry, where a woman has multiple husbands.
Right, right. I remember learning about those in anthropology class. So what does Palmieri say about how marriage evolved?
He suggests it might have started with polygamy. Imagine early humans focused on survival. Having more partners could mean more children and a stronger clan.
It's like a whole different way of thinking about family, isn't it?
Absolutely. But as societies developed, marriage shifted from being purely about survival to involving property, wealth, and power dynamics.
It's all about who has what, right?
Sadly, yeah. The book highlights how the Roman Empire had a surprisingly relaxed approach to divorce.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, but then, when the church stepped in, marriage became indissoluble. No more easy breakups. That really cemented the idea of marriage as a lifelong commitment, which carried on for centuries.
But didn't things change again with Protestantism?
They did. Protestantism brought back the idea of civil marriage and the possibility of divorce.
So basically, the definition of marriage has been in constant flux, influenced by social and religious forces.
Precisely. And that evolution continues today as we adapt to the modern world. That's where Palmieri's concept of the exploded quantum family comes in.
Okay, exploded quantum family. That sounds a little intense. What exactly does he mean by that?
Basically, he's talking about how family members are increasingly living separate lives.
Because of work and stuff?
Exactly. Work, school, all sorts of commitments.
Wow, when you put it like that, it really resonates. I mean, we're all so busy these days, even within the same household. It's almost like we're orbiting each other, but not always truly connecting. Is that what he's getting at?
That's a great way to put it. He links the shift to all the technological and social changes that have happened since World War II.
Yeah, it's been a whirlwind. The information age, globalization, everything's moving so fast.
And he even compares it to having bad indigestion. Like, the rate of change is faster than our ability to adapt.
Like trying to eat a 5-course meal in 5 minutes. You might get it all down, but did you really enjoy it?
The perfect analogy. So with all this change, have there been any attempts to, like, reinvent family structures?
I'm curious about that, too.
Well, Palmieri talks about this fascinating concept from the 1960s called the open family.
Open family. I've never heard of that. What is it?
Imagine a communal model where families share resources and maybe even partners. It was a pretty radical idea at the time.
Wow, that's a big departure from the traditional family unit. Did it catch on?
It was a bold experiment, but it ultimately didn't achieve widespread adoption. Still, it shows that people have been looking for alternative family structures for decades.
Yeah, that's a great point. So we've talked about the history and evolution of families, but what about the glue that holds them together? Love and commitment.
That's where things get really interesting. Palmieri breaks down the science and the mystery of how we form these deep connections.
Okay, I'm ready for this. Let's talk about falling in love. It's such a powerful experience, those butterflies that can't eat, can't sleep kind of intensity. Is it just our brains playing tricks on us?
Well, Palmieri describes falling in love as a powerful, chemically driven experience, almost like winning the lottery.
So you're saying those intense feelings might be more about brain chemistry than some grand notion of destiny.
It does make you think. And the science supports that idea. When we fall in love, our brains are flooded with amphetamine and endorphins. They create that feeling of euphoria.
So it's like a natural high.
Exactly. But Palmieri doesn't stop there. He also brings in this fascinating concept from Neil Donald Walsh's Conversations with God about the matrix.
Oh, I remember that book. Walsh talks about the matrix as this interconnected energy field that unites everything in the universe. So how does that relate to falling in love?
Well, Walsh suggests that when two people fall in love, their energy fields essentially merge to create a new combined entity. It's like two drops of water becoming one.
Okay, so science says it's brain chemicals, and Walsh offers this intriguing idea about energy fields merging. It's amazing how much we still don't know about the mysteries of the human heart.
Right. But Palmieri distinguishes between that initial rush of falling in love and what he calls real love or spherical love.
Okay, so spherical love. Is that like love without boundaries or conditions, love that encompasses everything? That sounds pretty ideal, but how does that work in real life?
That's a great question, and one we'll be exploring further in this deep dive.
Okay, looking forward to it.
But before we do, Palmieri brings up another important point: the different ways men and women often define commitment.
Oh, I can definitely see how that could lead to some misunderstandings.
Absolutely. And it's especially important to be aware of these different expectations when couples move from dating to living together.
It's like they're speaking different languages.
Exactly. And to illustrate this point, he even shares a personal anecdote about his son's school experiences. He noticed this rapid shift towards blended families and a normalization of divorce.
Which was a far cry from the family structures of his own childhood.
It's another example of how rapidly family dynamics are changing. And sadly, these changes often create real challenges for modern marriages.
That's a great transition to our next section, where we'll be diving into the complexities of sustaining love and navigating the ups and downs of modern relationships.
Get ready for some real-world insights, because Palmieri doesn't shy away from the hard truths about marriage in the 21st century.
So we've talked about falling in love and those early stages of commitment, but what happens when the honeymoon phase fades?
Right. How do you keep that spark alive in a long-term relationship?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is, and Palmieri doesn't sugarcoat things when it comes to the challenges of modern marriage. Like, he points out how difficult it can be to balance personal desires with societal expectations.
I can see that we're constantly bombarded with images of the perfect relationship, the ideal family. It's easy to feel like you're falling short.
Exactly, and that pressure can be a real burden on a couple.
So how do you navigate those societal pressures while staying true to yourselves as a couple?
Palmieri emphasizes the importance of open communication. Being able to honestly share your needs and desires, and being willing to adapt as you both grow and change.
That makes a lot of sense. Relationships are constantly evolving, right? What works for you at one stage might not work 5 years down the line.
Exactly, and you need to be able to communicate those changes and work together to find solutions that work for both of you.
Palmieri uses a really striking analogy to illustrate this point.
Oh, yeah.
He compares love to a delicate vase.
Okay, I like that.
He stresses the need to handle that vase with care, to address any cracks or chips before they turn into major breaks.
That's such a powerful image.
It really speaks to the importance of being mindful of the small things. Those things that can erode a relationship over time.
Absolutely.
What are some of those cracks we should be watching out for?
Well, one of the biggest ones, according to Palmieri, is trying to change your partner. He actually calls it criminal.
Whoa, that's a strong statement.
It is.
But I think I see where he's coming from. We all have our own quirks and imperfections, right? Trying to force someone into a mold they don't fit can only lead to resentment.
Exactly. It's about acceptance, about embracing your partner for who they are, flaws and all.
That doesn't mean you can't address issues or work on things together, but it starts with accepting your partner as a whole person.
Right. And when communication breaks down and unresolved issues pile up, it can lead to some really difficult situations.
Yeah, no kidding.
And Palmieri acknowledges that divorce is sometimes the outcome.
It's definitely a complex and often painful process. What does Palmieri say about navigating divorce, especially when children are involved?
He emphasizes the importance of finding emotional resolution and forgiveness, even if it's incredibly hard.
I imagine that's crucial for everyone's well-being, especially the kids. They pick up on so much, even if you try to shield them from the conflict.
Absolutely. He even suggests that maintaining a friendship with your ex-partner, if at all possible, can create a more stable environment for the children.
That makes sense.
Of course, that's not always easy, especially if there are new partners in the picture.
Right. That brings us to the whole other world of remarriage and step families.
Oh, yeah.
Blending family sounds like it comes with its own set of challenges.
It definitely does. You're bringing together different parenting styles,
Yeah.
pre-existing loyalties, and a whole lot of emotional baggage. It's a lot to navigate.
And it's interesting how this ties back to the idea of the exploded quantum family. If you're already juggling work kids and your own relationship, adding the dynamics of a step family can be overwhelming.
It's like trying to solve a multidimensional puzzle with pieces that don't always fit neatly together.
So with all of these complexities facing modern families, I'm curious to hear Palmieri's thoughts on parenting itself.
Well, he raises some pretty thought-provoking questions about whether people are truly prepared for the responsibilities of raising a child.
Like what?
He even suggests the idea of a license to have children.
Wait, a parenting license.
Mhm.
Like you have to pass the test before you can have kids.
It sounds radical, but I can see where he's coming from. Parenting is such a huge commitment, and it's not something to be taken lightly.
That's exactly his point. He's particularly concerned about the potential negative effects of excessive childcare on a child's development. He stresses the importance of parental presence, especially in those early years.
Right, being there for your kids really matters.
I'm really interested to hear more about that. So, does Palmieri offer any solutions? Does he think there are ways to better support families in the modern age?
He absolutely does. He proposes some pretty big societal changes, things like government-funded parental leave, workplace childcare facilities, and school schedules that are more aligned with working hours.
So basically, he's advocating for creating a more family-friendly environment where parents don't have to choose between their careers and their children.
Exactly. And to really drive this point home, he includes a test in the book with 10 questions for prospective parents to honestly assess their readiness for the commitment of raising a child.
You know, I'd love to see those questions. I bet they'd spark some really interesting conversations, even for people who aren't planning on having kids anytime soon.
Yeah.
It's all about being mindful and intentional, right?
Absolutely. Palmieri isn't saying that everyone needs to follow the same path, but he is encouraging us to be thoughtful about the choices we make and the impact they have on our families and our future.
It sounds like pleasereadme.pdf covers a lot of ground. We've gone from the history of marriage to the challenges of modern parenting, and it seems like Palmieri doesn't shy away from the big questions. But where does he leave us? What are his final thoughts on the future of love, marriage, and family?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. Palmieri actually ponders the potential obsolescence of marriage itself.
Wait, is he saying that marriage is going extinct?
He's not making a prediction, but he does raise some fascinating questions about the relevance of marriage in a world that's increasingly focused on individual values and personal fulfillment.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued. Let's dive into those final thoughts and see where this deep dive takes us. So this idea that marriage could become obsolete, that's a pretty big one to unpack. What leads Palmieri to that conclusion?
Well, if we think back to what we've discussed, there's this growing emphasis on individual happiness and fulfillment.
Right.
And these are great values, but they sometimes clash with the idea of lifelong commitment, which is at the core of traditional marriage.
It's almost like we're redefining what success looks like, both personally and in relationships.
Right.
So what does this mean for the future of marriage? Are we all destined to become commitment phobes?
Well, Palmieri doesn't have a crystal ball, of course.
Right.
But he prompts us to really examine our own beliefs and expectations around marriage. What does marriage mean to you? Does it still hold the same significance it did for previous generations?
It's a great question for all of us to consider, whether we're single, married, divorced, or somewhere in between.
Exactly. And maybe the future of marriage isn't about clinging to a rigid definition, but about being open to different models of commitment and family that better suit our individual needs and values.
Like I remember Palmieri mentioned the open family concept from the 1960s.
Right.
Maybe there's something to learn from those experiments, even if they didn't become mainstream at the time.
It's certainly worth considering. We've already seen a huge shift in family structures. Blended families, single parents, same-sex couples raising children. The diversity is amazing.
It really is. So maybe the future of marriage is less about fitting into a specific mold and more about embracing the evolution of human connection in all its forms.
It's a fascinating thought, isn't it? And this is where Palmieri brings in a quote from Khalil Gibran's The Prophet that really resonated with me.
Oh, is it the one about love not possessing or being possessed?
Yes, and the part about marriage where Gibran encourages couples to stand together yet not too near together, allowing space for individuality within the bond.
Right.
It's about finding that balance between connection and independence.
That makes so much sense. It's about supporting each other's growth while nurturing the relationship. And there was also that beautiful passage about children, wasn't there?
Oh, yes. Gibran reminds us that children are not our possessions, that their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow.
Right.
It's a reminder to guide them without trying to control their destinies.
What a beautiful sentiment. It really speaks to respecting our children as individuals and honoring their unique journeys.
Absolutely. It's a great takeaway for all of us, parents or not. Ultimately, it's about recognizing the interconnectedness of all relationships while still cherishing the individuality of each person involved.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what would you say is the most important message Palmieri leaves us with?
I think it's a call to be mindful and intentional in all our relationships, to be aware of the challenges facing modern families, but also to embrace the possibilities for growth and change.
I like that.
There's no one-size-fits-all answer, but by having open and honest conversations with our loved ones, we can find what works best for each of us.
That's beautifully said. So for you listening, if any of these ideas have resonated with you, I highly recommend checking out Palmieri's book, Please Read Me.pdf. It's a thought-provoking and at times challenging read, but it's sure to get you thinking about love, marriage, and family in new and insightful ways.
And as always, the real learning comes from applying these insights to your own life, having those meaningful conversations with your loved ones about what truly matters.
Couldn't agree more. Until next time, keep diving deep, keep questioning, and keep exploring the fascinating world of human connection.